to my talk on Cleopatra. Or I should say Cleopatra's. Now, this conversation that we're going to have will go into, yes, we will get to Cleopatra. We'll go in depth. We'll learn all about her. But we also need to give her context. And remember, she is one of the last of the great Ptolemies. And so much about who Cleopatra is, who she is, really is, we really have to understand the Ptolemies and that context. And you'll see why that is so by the time we get halfway through talking about the Ptolemies. Don't worry, this is definitely not a dry topic. In fact, after a while, when you hear some of these stories, you're going to be thinking to yourself, this would be a great soap opera or a movie drama. Okay, so basically what happens is that you have a general that fights with Alexander the Great. He will become known as Ptolemy the First. He goes with Alexander the Great off to Afghanistan and to India. They have various adventures together. In fact, he is there when Alexander the Great goes to the Oracle of Siwa. This is an interesting moment way out in the middle of the deserts of Libya, near what is now the Egyptian border. There's this ancient oracle dedicated to Amun Zeus. And what will happen is that Alexander the Great, he will enter into to this oracle, which is perched upon a strange-looking rock object in the middle of an oasis area. And here, supposedly, he heard the words of Zeus saying that his father, Philip, was not his father, but Zeus was his father. And of course, Alexander the Great got excited and says, wow, I'm half God. And of course, he viewed himself as a hero from that point on. Well, Ptolemy, he was there for all of that. But after Alexander the Great, after he died, there was something known as the Partition of Babylon. And at this point, the various generals and other individuals were given pieces of his empire to control. What will happen is that Ptolemy gets the chunk of Egypt. Of course, this doesn't mean that he gets it easily. There are some disputes, especially when the regent, his name is Perdiccas, predictable name. Perdiccas senses that Ptolemy wants too much control, and there is a fight, but eventually Ptolemy the First becomes the king of Egypt. And of course, he also attacks Cyrene next door, which is Libya, and adds it on to his new kingdom. All right. And then what will happen now is Ptolemy is now the first of the great Ptolemies of Egypt. And he's a historian, I like that about him. And he, in fact, is considered one of the most accurate of historians of Alexander the Great, which is pretty rare because Alexander the Great was, during his time, it was a very difficult topic for historians to write about. He was larger than life, and also simply they want to live. Well, now you have a need to bring the Egyptians together. Now, the Greeks and the Egyptians are very different cultures. What was one way to bring them together? Ptolemy the First was a genius. He thought to himself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a religion that brings together both Greek and Egyptian elements together. And so how do we say this? He just makes up a religion that is a hybrid between the two. And so He will basically get a Greek priest and an Egyptian priest to work together. The Greek priest's name is Timotheus. And Timotheus, he was connected to the Eleusinian mysteries. And meanwhile, you also have Manetho, which of course was an Egyptian priest. And they came up with this idea, and probably other elements as well, where they combine Egyptian with Greek deities, and they have hybrids that will speak to the entire population. I mean, it's the old story, those who pray together stay together, or offer sacrifices together, especially if you have the king as a center aspect of that worship. You guys following me so far? Remember, in ancient Egypt, the Pharaoh was empowered because of why, right? He was in a sense a god king, right? He was a god king. He had Horus in a sense within him, the spirit of Horus within him, which makes his mommy and daddy Isis and Osiris, right? You gotta please Pharaoh. Well, how do you bring that concept to the Greek kings of Egypt? Well, you gotta it's genius. You bring it together. These ideas, these elements of this belief system will go all the way, of course, to Cleopatra, the seventh, the topic of our conversation. So this is where it begins. And so they have a divine triad. I won't spend forever talking about this divine triad, but basically you have a god by the name of Serapis, which combines the Egyptian god Osiris with Apis, and then in turn bring it together with the Greek god Hades. And as you know, Osiris is the god of the underworld, the afterlife, the dead, right? So that's an important aspect. So it's known again as Serapis, right? Claimed according to Plutarch, there's you got to have some kind of mythological story. So the story goes is that Ptolemy had a dream where he saw a colossus statue of Hades in Sinope, which is located along the southern Black Sea coastline. And so he saw this supposedly as a sign, and so he set out people to find this particular image and bring it back, or to steal it. And then at that point, of course, that's brought back and it's recognized to be this Serapis. Now, where does the word Serapis come from? A lot of people argue about Plutarch's use of this word, the origins. We know, according to Orion, there was a god by the name of Serapis who had a temple in Babylon at the time of Alexander the Great's death. Yeah. And in fact, this god was consulted just before Alexander the Great died. And this basically is connected to the god Ea, also known as Enki, and who's referred to as Serapsi, which simply means the king of the deep. So this could be the actual origins. But the cult of Serapis will spread all the way through Egypt, and then wherever the Ptolemies go, so do the temples of Serapis. It's very interesting. I've actually visited a few temples of Serapis. I visited one at Ephesus. It has monumental columns that are still in situ in front. And you take a look at the archaeology, and you can see that there's evidence that there's water fixtures, which would be connected to purification rituals associated with the Nile. I've been to another one, Serapion, in Pergamum. This is a huge, gigantic temple, and there is a river that runs underground. And again, there's a stairway down into this river, once again, for rituals that are connected to the Nile River. And then there's another one that was at Miletus. All these areas at a certain period of time were connected to the Ptolemies. The Ptolemies did conquer uh, Western Anatolia for a period of time. Okay, so you had Serapis. You also have within this cult Isis, right? Although this Isis also combines Demeter, Aphrodite, Athena, Artemis, so they all kind of come together, and so that's his wife. That's Serapis' wife, his consort, and then of course on top of that you're going to have the third, who is Harpocrates, which is basically connected a little bit to the child god Horus, but also connected to the mysteries, and sometimes shown with his fingers to his lips, right? The god of silence in a sense, right? Okay, so and there was during the time of Ptolemy the First, they organized this cult. I mean, it was pretty elaborate. The most of the priests were Egyptians who decided to join this public cult that brought everybody together. So the typical shaved heads and wearing linen at all times, right? One interesting aspect of their beliefs is that the priests could not eat any food that has moisture in it. It all had to be pretty dry. The images, basically every day, were ritually undressed, and then they were bathed, then redressed in brand new clothes, and then worshiped throughout the day with incense and first fruits, and of course music and dance. And then in the evening, they were all put to bed. So this kind of reflects many belief systems that we have today as well. So I find that interesting. Okay, other aspects here. Um, Also, when it comes to the hierarchy, you had a high priest, followed by the individual known as the interpreter of dreams. And then you had those who kept the robes, as well as various attendants who kept the texts and so forth, scribes, and then finally the guardians of the temple. Okay, so Ptolemy, he does something else. He first he founds the city of Alexandria. And Alexandria is a very important city, but it didn't exist. Actually, yeah, Alexander the Great founded the city, but it wasn't much. It's Ptolemy the First that really was the founder on many different levels, and Ptolemy, uh, he was able to, how do I say this, attain the body of Alexander the Great. And so when he moved from his location further up the Nile down to Alexandria, he brought the body of Alexander the Great with him and buried him in a prominent tomb directly in the middle of this metropolis. Now, I have to say that in antiquity, cities were known because of their ancient legacies, but Alexandria didn't have that. It was a brand new establishment, a bunch of soldiers and sailors and merchants and other types, right? so, so they had to come up with something to give them a good name. All around Alexandria, you got papyrus, which of course is easy to use to transform and to make into paper. So guess what? Uh, Alexandria became known as the book manufacturing center of much of the ancient world. And so book production. Okay, so and now they have a name for themselves, which means that it has to be the center of literature. Well, um, Ptolemy, uh, he also founded what's called a museum. This museum dedicated to the muses, dedicated to literature and art and all that science, right? He founded this museum within his palace, and he wanted to attract people, scholars, to come to Alexandria and to share in this intellectual culture that he was trying to put together. So, how do you attract scholars? Well, first of all, free food at the very best, free lodging. They can stay as long as they want. And oh, by the way, sumptuous pay. You don't have to pay any taxes on it. And all they had to do was stay at this beautiful palace, lecture along the colonnades, share dinners together, and share your ideas. And of course, make sure that you have some pupils that follow after you. But beyond that, scholars like books. Now, just simply mass producing books, that's not enough. And so Ptolemy the first sent out agents throughout the ancient world, collecting the best manuscripts and bringing them back to Alexandria. And that really did work. So that's another thing that he did. I mean, Ptolemy really is important on so many different levels. He also founded the first, because now the museum is expanding into a library. And so he's the one who appointed the first librarian of this library of Alexandria. His name is Seduce of Ephesus. He was the bibliophilix, or the guardian of the books. And he created a system whereby everything was placed in, for the first time, in alphabetical order according to author. Also, he's the one who put the tabs at the very end of the tablets, designating the person's name as well as their ethnic. So there you have that. It did attract quite a few scholars. So you're going to have Euclid will arrive, who will create his standard text on geometry at the Library of Alexandria. You're going to have Strato that will arrive there too. He's the one who believed that all material objects consist of something called particles. He even they're invisible, he said, to the eye. Even empty space consists of various particles. So he believed that. And then, of course, you're going to even have Herophilius, who studied human cadavers for the first time for strictly scientific reasons. Dissecting the eye, he's the one who named the various aspects of our eyes, as well as the female reproductive system. That's Ptolemy the First. He's followed by Ptolemy the Second, who ruled from 282 to 246 BCE. Ptolemy the Second was very much into zoology. Fascinated with animals of all different kinds. In fact, he actually sets up a zoo that's extended out into the museum. Look at all kinds of exotic animals. According to Isabel Sevilla, you have those known as boas. These snakes are called that. The first time they're called boa. It's because they killed cattle and oxen, so supposedly, by entwining themselves around the udders and sucking them dry. All kinds of animals. He had elephants and antelopes and ostriches and zebras and wild asses, and of course parrots and peacocks and pheasants and white bears and you name it. Just a rhinoceros, a giraffe. Yeah, it's the beginning of zoos. So there you have it, right? Ptolemy the Second also created this like Olympic Games, local one in the area that met every 4 years. He reached out to contact India. He sent representatives to India. One ambassador by the name of Dionysius arrived at the Mauryan Empire. And, he saw the beautiful towers of Pataliputra. And we know that Ashoka greeted him. Ashoka is recorded, sent his ambassadors back to Alexandria. And many of these, actually, these ambassadors were Buddhists, and they were preaching Buddhism in Alexandria. in the court of Ptolemy II. I mean, this is pretty interesting stuff, right? It is during the time of Ptolemy II that this kingdom expands and has an overseas empire. It expands north. It, of course, includes the Levant, which is Israel, Palestine, but also he conquers further and takes over the western coast of Asia Minor, of Anatolia. So the cities of Ephesus and Pergamum, well, and Miletus, a lot of these cities are now under the Ptolemies. In fact, Pamphylia, Lycia, and Caria are also under the Ptolemies of Egypt. So Ptolemy II was the first to try to codify the Iliad and the Odyssey. He is also the one for the Library of Alexandria to declare the need for the Hebrew Bible to be translated into Greek, according to the letter of Aristeas from the 2nd century BCE. And of course, the Babylonian Talmud also talks about this fact as well, where you're going to get 72 scribes placed into 72 separate rooms, each with a copy of the Hebrew Bible, of course, in Hebrew, and each were to translate it into Greek. And then what happens is a miracle, according to the story. They return together, and all 72 copies of this Greek translation, of all their Greek translations, miraculously were the same. And of course, the Greek Septuagint is the basis of Christianity. I'm sorry, it's not. You read the New Testament most of the times where you have the New Testament quote from the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible. It is from the Septuagint version, not the Hebrew version, not an Aramaic version. So, and by the way, when these Hebrew is translated into Greek, all these philosophical ideas that are attached naturally to the language of Greek enter into the Jewish discourse. All right, so that is Ptolemy the Second. You're going to have, of course, moving on, and we're moving a little quickly here. I'm actually 13 pages in already. You're thinking, wow, you just talked that much in that short amount of time? Yeah, I did. Archimedes, by the way, arrived at this time at the Library of Alexandria. It's kind of looking around. Moving on, Ptolemy the Third. Ptolemy the Third. He's the one who published official decrees on massive stone blocks. He's the one who normalized the idea of translating, having them in 3 languages: Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphic, and Demotic. Later on, you're going to have those who follow after him will continue this legacy, and will have, of course, something called the Rosetta Stone, which is key to deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphics. Ptolemy III, we know from the Canopus inscription from March 4th, 238 BCE, that they deeply revere, the Ptolemies already as divine godlike figures, right? So I could read this very long inscription. I'll just read the first part. High priests, the prophets, those who enter the Holy of Holies for the robing of the god, those who wear the hawk's wing, the sacred scribes, and the other priests who assembled from the temples throughout the land, declared, since King Ptolemy, son of Ptolemy and Arsinoe, the brother-sister gods, you heard that? They call them the brother-sister gods, and Queen Bernike, right? You know, their sister and wife, the benefactor gods, right? Constantly confer many gifts on the temples throughout the land and increase more and more the honors of the gods and show constant care for Apis, and it goes on and on and on. But they refer to them as the brother sisters. By the way, I do want to mention that Ptolemy II was married to his own sister. So this is the beginning of marrying into the family to keep the legacy strong. Ptolemy III didn't do that, though. Ptolemy III, he married um, uh, Bernice the second. Married Bernice the second, and who's the daughter of King Magnus of Cyrene, and they had 6 children together. Uh, Bernice, Berenice, excuse me, had a city named after her, which is today the modern city of Benghazi, which is based upon her name. We'll talk about her in a little bit. But Ptolemy III, he was a patron of literature, and what he did is he extended the Library of Alexandria from the palace to another location. The palace had lots of books. In fact, quite a few. It's 490,000 books. And he decided to create a daughter library at the Temple of Serapis. Makes sense? And that will eventually contain 42,800 books. And so now we have one collection in 2 libraries under Ptolemy the Third. By the way, Ptolemy the Third also made the definitive editions of Sophocles and Euripides to be created. So the versions that we have today arrive from that. The librarian of the Library of Alexandria, the head his name is Aristophanes. He was a genius. He was able to calculate the circumference of the Earth through naked eye observations, and he got pretty close, I would say. Basically, he calculated that the Earth was 40,074 kilometers. So yeah, it's 40,075. So yeah, he's good. Yeah. He also made a definitive map of the world that went from Ireland all the way to India. Okay, so what will happen now is Ptolemy the Third will start to fight with those are known as the Seleucids of Syria, and so this is where it gets kind of messy. So basically, you're going to have how do I make this real simple? Ptolemy the Third has his daughter Bernice marry Antiochus II, and in order to come to some kind of agreement, and Antiochus then divorced his first wife Laodicea the first. But what happened is that when Ptolemy II died in 246, Antiochus II decided to return to his first wife Laodicea, and then Antiochus then died. Now the question is, whose kids do we follow? Bernice's kids or Laodicea's kids? And what will happen is well, actually, what will happen is the Seleucids will kill his daughter, and there's going to be obviously a war. So go to Laodicea's kids. Anyway, so there you have it. So reason why I'm bringing this up, I know, why are we bringing up this war? Who cares? Reason why is because what happens is Ptolemy the Third has to spend so much of his time away from Egypt that he has to leave somebody in charge. Who is going to leave in charge? His wife, Bernice II. So she, in a sense, becomes the ruler of Egypt while he is away fighting these battles against Syria. And this is the beginning of female leadership within the Ptolemies. This is where it starts. It said that she shaved off her hair and dedicated it to Aphrodite to ensure his safe return, but that when they looked for her hair later on, it floated apparently into the heavens, and they named an entire constellation after her hair that's hanging in the heavens. Now we get to Ptolemy the Fourth, and Ptolemy the Fourth it means father loving. His last name is Ptolemy the Fourth, Philopater, right? He loves his, loves his father. Well, that's probably because he killed his mother is murdered. So Bernice the second is murdered because she is considered very dangerous, right? Very powerful. Remember, she was able to rule Egypt, and that's now a threat to her son. And so he reigns dominated by his ministers. But during his time, there's rebellions, and Upper Egypt becomes independent, and they will set up two indigenous pharaohs that will be in charge of Upper Egypt. At one point, they'll have 80% of Egypt. Well, after he passes on, Ptolemy V becomes the next king, 204 to 181 BCE. He's only 5 years old when he takes the throne of Egypt, which of course, is pretty interesting, right? Pretty young. As somebody mentions that, the Palma Bernice is the name of the constellations named after her hair. Yes, very good. So what happens is that Ptolemy is basically, because he's so young, two court appointees are in charge, Agathocles and Sosabius. And so this is a period of time, again, of disruption. It's also a period of time where the Ptolemies lose much of Western Anatolia. But this is another big moment. Here we go. There's constant fighting between Antiochus III and Ptolemy V, Antiochus III of the Seleucids, who, by the way, does take over the Levant. So they take the Levant, the area of Israel and Palestine, away from the Ptolemies. So it's now under the Seleucids. Well, what I want to mention is they come to an agreement, and it's a marriage alliance, marriage alliance between, so the Syrian king, Antiochus III, gives his daughter to the Egyptian Greek king. Her name is Cleopatra. Cleopatra the First. There it is. And so Cleopatra now, somebody named Cleopatra now enters into common knowledge during this period of time. So we have a Cleopatra. Now, unfortunately, Ptolemy the second is, when he does grow up, not a very good king. He's known for his cruelty, but it's also during his reign that you have the famous Rosetta Stone that is erected in his 9th year, and it was dedicated to the worship of Arsinoe, the wife and sister of Ptolemy II, the worship of Berenice, the wife of Ptolemy III, and the worship of Arsinoe Cleopatra, the mother of Ptolemy the fifth. So once again, you're going to have worship of these women within the lineage of the Ptolemies, right? Meanwhile, you're going to have a new librarian at the Library of Alexandria. His name is Aristophanes of Byzantium. He had no toleration for plagiarism. He made 2 new editions of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and he's the one who came up for the first time the concept of punctuation marks called distinctions. He's the one who came up with the idea of having in sentences a comma, a colon, and a period. That's pretty amazing. It is also during this time that the Eumenes of the Pergamon Empire, which is in Asia Minor. So Eumenes of Pergamum decides that he's going to have his own library of Pergamum to compete with the one in Alexandria. And so what will happen is Ptolemy V makes it forbidden that any papyrus is to be imported to Pergamum. And in reaction to that, the Attalans, those who are connected to Pergamum, they will use parchment for their form of writing. Right on. Now we get really complicated. So I'm going to take a swig of water as we go down a rabbit trail. This is a soap opera. So basically, Cleopatra the First, because Ptolemy, the fifth eyes, Cleopatra the First becomes the official regent of Ptolemy the Sixth. Got that so far? You could write this down. This gets really complicated. So here, Cleopatra the First becomes the official regent of Ptolemy the Sixth. Ptolemy the Sixth, then, who is, of course, obviously the son of Cleopatra the First, Ptolemy the Sixth marries his sister, Cleopatra the Second. Okay, you got that so far? And during this period of time, there is suddenly this fight, this war that's going on, in which, of course, I'll go into this. Basically what happens is this: is Ptolemy the Sixth was only 6 years old, but of course, obviously, the mother was not killed in this case. Became the official regent, that being Cleopatra the First. By the way, the name Cleopatra means in Greek "glory of her fatherland," so it is a Greek name. I'll just mention that. Okay, and as I said before, Ptolemy the Sixth married his sister Cleopatra the Second. They had 4 children together. Right. Now, what happened is that the Seleucid king Antiochus the Fourth attacks Egypt, and he even takes over Egypt, and he becomes king of Egypt in 168 BCE. But then Rome enters into the picture for the very first time and tells basically Antiochus the Seleucid king that you cannot be in charge of Egypt. You got to go. You got to leave. And this is the first instance of Rome intervening in the affairs of the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. Okay, so now what will happen is Ptolemy the Sixth will be sharing power in what's called a triumvirate with his sister wife Cleopatra the Second and their younger brother Ptolemy the Eighth. Ptolemy the Eighth is going to be a nightmare. So now you're going to have, once again, I'll say it again, Ptolemy the Sixth will be equal in power to Cleopatra the Second, which is his sister wife, and of course Ptolemy the Eighth, which is of course their younger brother. The 3 are together. Well, what happens is that Ptolemy the Third is a terrible person. He is just a horrendous human being. He kicks Ptolemy the Sixth out of power. So Ptolemy the Eighth kicks Ptolemy the Sixth out of power. And so Ptolemy the Sixth goes for help. Where does he go? He goes to Rome for help. And so what will happen is that Rome will intervene and make peace between the brothers. And now they are in charge again, along with their sister. Okay. Now Ptolemy the Eighth, here he is again, wants to invade Cyprus. And his older brother tells him no. So he goes to Rome and says, I want to invade Cyprus. And the Senate says, we'll support you to invade Cyprus. So the younger brother, Ptolemy the Eighth, invades Cyprus. He loses. He invades again. He loses. But there you have it. It's kind of an interesting kind of mess. Then what happens is that Ptolemy, long and the short of it is Ptolemy then the Sixth also rules with one of his sons, Ptolemy the Seventh. If you're wondering where that seventh comes from, Ptolemy the Sixth recognizes the pretender to the throne of the Seleucids, Alexander Balus, and he gives his own daughter Cleopatra Thea to seal the alliance. But then, while Alexander Balus was putting down a rebellion in Cilicia, Ptolemy decided to invade Syria, capture Seleucia, and then he took his daughter, divorced her from Alexander Bolus and remarried his daughter Cleopatra Thea to Alexander's rival Demetrius II and supports him instead. Told you, it gets pretty crazy during this period of time. Also, meanwhile, as all this mess is going on, we have the first instance of the writings of Hermes Trismegistus that are just written during this period of time. Also, we have a librarian of the Library of Alexandria who's putting together the first dictionaries. Okay, so we're almost done with the complications, and we're going to be getting close to Cleopatra, but we'll see where we're going here. So what happens now? Long and the short of it is, right, Ptolemy VIII now forms a triumvirate with Cleopatra II, who is the former wife of Ptolemy the Sixth, and creates a triumvirate including her son Ptolemy the Seventh. Got it so far. So then Cleopatra II marries Ptolemy VIII, which of course she marries her younger brother. Then Ptolemy VIII murders Ptolemy VII at the wedding. And then Ptolemy VIII divorces Cleopatra II, and he marries Cleopatra III, which is Cleopatra II's daughter and his niece. Then Cleopatra II defeats Ptolemy VIII and her own daughter. And then Ptolemy VIII is afraid because he doesn't want to have anybody that could take on the kingship after him. So he murders his own son, another Ptolemy, and sends his son's dismembered head and hands and feet to Cleopatra II in Alexandria. Meanwhile, Cleopatra II rules then Egypt, but then Ptolemy comes back, defeats her, and then Cleopatra goes off to Syria to join her daughter Cleopatra Thea and Demetrius, and then there's a reconciliation after all that, and Ptolemy VIII and Cleopatra II ruled together. You just can't make this up, or you can, because then when they die, guess who? The daughter Cleopatra III becomes Queen of Egypt with the son Ptolemy IX, and with her other son Ptolemy X. And what happens is that she rotates between her two sons, 9th and 10th, taking turns of who's going to rule with Mama. It just now, okay? You're thinking this can't get any worse. Well, of course, it does continue to get worse, as you can imagine. Is that eventually Ptolemy Ptolemy X, it's just pretty upset at Mom, and he kills Cleopatra III, his mom. Now Ptolemy X is in charge. We're getting to Cleopatra. We're getting there. We're almost there. So then what happens is Ptolemy X dies, okay? And so Ptolemy IX regains the throne, but when he dies, his wife, Berenice III, rules, right? And is, of course, the wife of Ptolemy XI, who also rules. Well, what happens is that for a short period of time, she's ruling and people love her, but Ptolemy, what will happen, the 11th will murder her, and then the people murder Ptolemy the 11th, and there's no legitimate heir. You guys got it? Of course not. Who could? I'm telling you, this would be a great movie. This is the worst soap opera I have ever heard. We're talking about, and I just played it down. You just heard the bare bones. You heard the details of all this. You would just go, wow, why isn't this like some TV drama? It has everything that you shouldn't want to like to have. So what does that mean? You got a mess. Who's going to take over? Who's left? Well, they found two illegitimate children, sons of Ptolemy, uh, of Ptolemy the Ninth, two illegitimate sons that, and the oldest one is Ptolemy the 12th. That is the father of the Cleopatra the Seventh that we all know. Ah, we finally got there. That's right. Ptolemy. Okay, so Ptolemy now. Let's go there. Ptolemy the 12th. Ptolemy the 12th. He is known as the flute player because he loves playing the pipes. In fact, Strabo writes that not all the kings after the third Ptolemy, being corrupted by luxurious living, have administered the affairs of government badly. But worst of all, the fourth, seventh, and the last, Autopsies, who, apart from his general licentiousness, practiced the accompaniment of choruses with the flute, and upon this he prided himself so much that he would not hesitate to celebrate contests in a royal palace, and at these contests would come forward to vie with the opposing contestants. In other words, he loves playing the flute. He is of Macedonian descent. As I said before, the Egyptian people, they removed Ptolemy the 11th from the throne because he murdered the very popular Bernice III with no legitimate male heirs remaining. And so the Egyptians were forced to find a legitimate son instead. And so he was fathered by Ptolemy, Ptolemy the Ninth, and an unknown Greek concubine living in the court of Mithridates, king of Pontus, and so became, of course, Ptolemy the 12th. Ptolemy the 12th ruled from 80 to 58 BCE and from 55 to 51 BCE. Much of his rule is all about pleasing Rome as much as possible. In fact, in 63 BCE, when it appeared that Pompey was the most prominent leader of the Roman world, Ptolemy the 12th sent various riches to him and an invitation for him to meet at Alexandria. Ptolemy hoped to create some kind of patron-client relationship between the two, also with Julius Caesar, but it didn't seem to work. So he decided to bribe his way into friendship with the Romans. And so he paid Caesar and Pompey 6,000 talents. And you know what happened? Immediately, there was a formal relationship between Ptolemy the 12th and Rome. Because, you know, money talks, right? Well, unfortunately, when the Romans conquered the island of Cyprus from his brother, Ptolemy the 12th just kind of turned a blind eye because he has an alliance with Rome. The Egyptians are pretty upset by that. And the fact that he raised taxes to pay for the money, to pay off, of course, the amount that he bribed the Romans to enter into this alliance in the first place. And so they overthrow him for a short period of time. And who's in charge? A third triumvirate, being his wife, Cleopatra the Fifth, with Berenice the Fourth, and Cleopatra the Sixth. Yes, you have all-female triumvirate rulership over the Ptolemies. Most people have never heard of this before. All right, well, what will happen is that Ptolemy panics, and so he and Cleopatra the Seventh flee to Rome. Who's Cleopatra the Seventh? Yeah, the Cleopatra that we all know and maybe love so well. Cleopatra the Seventh. They flee to Rome, and because they have this alliance with Pompey, well, that's where they go. They stay at Pompey's place, and he tries to build up support to take over the throne again in Alexandria. But members of the Senate were not in favor of it. But the Roman creditors were. because they wanted their money back. So because of that, they supported the idea, but not directly the actual reconquest. So what Ptolemy the 12th has to do is that he actually hires a certain Aelius Gabinius, who's a Roman statesman and a general, and then also a supporter of Pompey, and he pays him 10,000 talents to invade Egypt in 55 BCE. And so, paying for this, he takes over Egypt and defeats the triumvirate, these three women that were in power. But now, of course, it's payback time. We got to pay off all these debts. And certain soldiers and mercenaries known as the Gabinini are placed in charge of trying to get their money back. Because, if the Roman creditors, they wanted their money returned. He didn't want to raise taxes again because that got him kicked out last time. So he decided to appoint a Roman by the name of Postumus as his minister of finance to be in charge of debt repayments. He proved to be so unpopular that he had to throw his own debt collector into jail, not because he was in trouble with him, in order to protect him, to save his life. And as a result, they fled, and he had to pay back by debasing his own coinage. And then Ptolemy, in his will, mandated that when he died, Cleopatra had to marry her younger brother, Ptolemy the 13th. So there you have it. Now we have Cleopatra. You can see this is quite an interesting patchwork quilt of intrigue. So when we hear all the mess that is involved in Cleopatra's life, this is called business as usual when it comes to the Ptolemies. And she was only 17 or 18 years old when she became queen of Egypt. And her brother, husband, who is Ptolemy the 13th, he was only 12 years old at this time, right? He did have the title of Pharaoh, but he did not have any actual powers because he was considered young. And so for the first 3 years, Cleopatra really ruled on her own. Now, her appearance, let's talk about her appearance. Now, I think, first of all, I think we are too obsessed about what people look like, and especially when it comes to what women look like. I think it's problematic with our culture. It shouldn't matter, but it is a big topic, so I will address it. She does not coincide necessarily to some people's modern Western standards of beauty. I disagree completely. I think she's very beautiful. That's just me, maybe. But basically, she was considered. I mean, she didn't look like Elizabeth Taylor, but who looks like Elizabeth Taylor, right? But the thing is that she was considered beautiful also during her time. Where's my sources for this? Cassius Dio. Cassius Dio wrote that she was a woman of surpassing beauty. And at that time, I'm still quoting him, at that time, when she was in the prime of her youth, she was most striking, unquote. Appian also says from that time, the remarks upon the, quote, beautiful image of Cleopatra, and how Anthony was, quote, amazed at her wit as well as her good looks. Lucan, another primary source, repeatedly refers to her beauty. Plutarch, however, was not one of those people. There's always, one or two, right? Saying that her beauty was not in itself so remarkable that none could be compared with her, or that no one could see her without being struck by it, but instead it was he says, the contact of her presence if you live with her, which was irresistible, which was irresistible. She had this charisma, this energy that brought people to her and compelled them to see her as very beautiful. From the remaining images and coins that we have, she has prominent features, an aquiline nose with a slight hook at the end, a stronger chin, deeper set eyes, always a very elaborate hairdo to match her station, right? Um, Ancient sources make her very seductive. Her charisma, again, was infectious. It's not like Pascal's remarks. Remember that Cleopatra's nose, had it been shorter, the whole face of the world would have been changed. Of course, the irony in this means basically from the 17th century is that larger nose symbolized power. That's what I meant there. Cleopatra was known for her intelligence. She was able to speak 9 different languages, including ancient Egyptian, right? In fact, she's the very first pharaoh to be able to do so of the Ptolemies. Did you guys know that? All the Ptolemies, all those Greek Ptolemies, you would think they would take the time to learn, the Egyptian language. They didn't. They just spoke Greek. Like conquerors, she learned the indigenous language. Cleopatra also spoke Hebrew fluently. We know, according to Plutarch, which is important because 1/4 of the city of Alexandria were Jewish. She spoke even a language known as Troglodyte. It's an Ethiopian language. Herodotus said it sounded like the screech of bats. She could speak that. Her voice, it was said to be beautiful, even musical in its tone. Plutarch says, it was a pleasure merely to hear the sound of her voice, which, like an instrument of many strings, she could pass from one language to another, so that there were few barbarian nations that she answered by an interpreter. To most of them, she spoke herself. Wow. Yeah. Cleopatra, the first part of her rule was pretty smooth until one of her advisors becomes jealous. His name is Pothinus. And so what he does, he's jealous of her power. So he convinces her younger brother, Ptolemy the 13th, to overthrow her. And so in 48 BCE, Cleopatra was overthrown and exiled from Egypt, accompanied by her sister Arsinoe. And, she then amassed troops along the border. Meanwhile, there is a Roman civil war going on between Julius Caesar and Pompey, which really divided much of the Mediterranean realm. Julius Caesar knew Pompey and his soldiers well enough, which did give him a distinct advantage. At one point, Caesar told his soldiers to throw their spears directly at Pompey's troops' faces, because knowing that they were so vain, they would protect their faces from being marred, and then, of course, give them the fighting advantage. Pompey is not doing very well during this period of time. And after he lost the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE, he sailed to Pelusium. Where's he going to go? Well, remember under Ptolemy the 12th, there's an alliance between Pompey and him. And so it's natural for Pompey to go to Egypt to find support, right? From Julius Caesar. There always were close allies. So Pompey arrives at shore, and so Ptolemy the 13th is sitting there on the shore with his advisors, and he's not sure exactly what to do. Am I supposed to receive Pompey after he lost against Julius Caesar, who clearly is the better warrior? Why would I stick my neck out for him? And so it was decided according to his advisor, Theodotus said, dead men don't bite. So I guess it's best to remove Pompey from the playing field. And so what happened is that Pompey arrives in the ship. He jumps out into the shallow waters. He starts walking towards Ptolemy, the 13th, and his advisors who are further up on the hill. Unfortunately, what they do is he is stabbed right there in the belly before he even reaches the beach, killed right there in front of everybody, including his wife who was on board the boat. Awful. Then Ptolemy the 13th, what he did is he cut off the head of Pompey, and they brought the head of Pompey to Julius Caesar, expecting Julius Caesar to think this is the greatest thing. Julius Caesar was not pleased because this was his friend. Just because they fought against each other doesn't mean they didn't have a friendship, right? It was his brother-in-law to his sister. And so instead of soothing Caesar, Ptolemy really instilled his wrath. And he even cried. He was so angry. And so Julius Caesar arrived at the palace to become an arbitrator between Ptolemy and Cleopatra. He wanted to settle their dispute. But of course, where's Cleopatra? She's not there. Here we go. Here comes the story. So Cleopatra, she needs to get into the city to make her claim. So Julius Caesar can act as an arbitrator. Needs to get there. But she doesn't want to be killed by her little brother, his agents. So one version of the story is that she is smuggled before Julius Caesar in either a bag or an oriental rug. And then, of course, brought before Caesar, unrolled, and Cleopatra tumbles out before him. I gotta tell you this something it did, because Julius Caesar, how do I put this? He's not a man to be taken off guard. He always anticipates every moment. He had to. This is what made him victorious in battle. It was the surprise that gave him the advantage. But in this case, when Cleopatra suddenly rolled out in front of him, he actually caught this seasoned Roman general by surprise. And he was able to take advantage of him in that moment to further enthrall him. Immediately, at that moment, Cleopatra displayed her powers over Caesar to the point where he slept with her that very night. According to Cassius Dio, it says, for she was a woman of surpassing beauty, and at that time when she was in the prime of her youth, she was most striking. She also possessed a most charming voice and a knowledge of how to make herself agreeable to everyone, being brilliant to look upon and to listen to, with the power to subjugate everyone, even a love-sated man already past his prime. He thought that it would be in keeping with her role to meet Caesar, and she reposed in her beauty all her claims to the throne. She asked, therefore, for admission to his presence, and obtaining permission, adorned and beautified herself so as to appear before him in the most majestic and at the same time pity-inspiring guise. When she had perfected her schemes, she entered the city, for she had been living outside of it, and by night, without Ptolemy's knowledge, went into a palace. According to Florus, he comments that the beauty of the damsel, which was enhanced by the fact that being so fair, she seemed to have been wronged. Oh, so what happened is that now the game changer, right? Plutarch says it was by this device, the bedroll or the carpet of Cleopatra's, it is said that Caesar was first captivated, for she showed herself to be a bold coquette. So they spend the night together. Guess what happens? The next morning, who finds them? Of course, Ptolemy the 13th, which of course is her brother husband, her little brother husband. He has an outburst and he declares that he's been betrayed. Well, Caesar does have Ptolemy arrested. Pharaoh's army, that's led by the eunuch Pothinus and Cleopatra's sister Arsinoe, suddenly surrounds the palace. And so Caesar is forced to release Ptolemy the 13th. And so now we're going to have an Alexandrian war that does last for 6 months. In the middle of this chaos, right, you have Caesar being cut off from supplies. And of course, Caesar burned all these vessels in the dockyard since he could not protect so wide an area with a small force. So he did not burn the Library of Alexandria. I just want to mention that. What got burned were books, indeed, but books that were located in warehouses that were going to be shipped out to the various places. Remember, we get confused between a library and a book distribution center. It's not the same thing. So, in fact, we have a reference by one of his generals that mentioned the fact that nothing in Alexandria burned at all because of the tile roofs. So I want to mention that. Also, I want to also mention that we know by 24 BCE, Strabo came to Alexandria and there wasn't damage there. Remember, and so the palace wasn't damaged. We also know from Julius Caesar that he spent the night in the palace right after this conflict. Why is that important? Because it's the palace where the library is located. Oh yeah. So yeah, he didn't burn down where he was staying. Ultimately, Pothinus was killed in battle, and Ptolemy the 13th drowned. And so Cleopatra is now set on the throne. Of course, I'm going to be going over because I started late. So I'm going to finish up the story. Okay, so Caesar returns Cleopatra to the throne, where she marries another brother. What? Yeah, Ptolemy the 14th, who was about 11 or 12 years at the time. Wait, she married again? Yeah, you just got to keep it all in the family, apparently. Meanwhile, she and Julius Caesar, after the wedding, took a nice break from politics and war, and they took a 2-month cruise on the Nile. Isn't that nice? They go up the Nile. They sailed all the way to Ethiopia. Or we say would have if the troops hadn't stopped them, but they had a great time. They really had a great time. Really had a great time. In fact, Cleopatra became pregnant and gave birth to his son, known as, guess what? Ptolemy the 15th, called Caesarion, which means Little Caesar, right? And it was, Little Caesar supposedly looked very much like Julius Caesar. Caesar did acknowledge Caesarion as his legitimate son. Okay, so this is getting more messy as we go along. Okay, so yeah, wait, one brother that she was married to, Ptolemy the 13th, was killed, and then she married another brother, and then she went off on a cruise with Julius Caesar and had a son by Julius Caesar. Yeah, there it is. Okay, Now, what will happen is it gets even more interesting, is the fact that, and nobody, I think this would be fascinating. Did you guys know that now, uh, Julius Caesar returns to Rome? It's time for the triumph against Pompey. Yes. So in September of 46 BCE, he led the prisoners of war and Cleopatra's sister Arsenal through on a parade along the streets. There you have it. And then after the parade, you know where Cleopatra lived for the next 2 years? He lived in Caesar's own villa for the next 2 years in Rome. Cleopatra is living in Rome for 2 years? Yeah. They never talk about that. No, they don't. It gets even more interesting, of course. It's during that time he gives Cleopatra various gifts and titles. In fact, they erected a statue of Cleopatra in the temple of Venus Genetrix. Appian remarks on the beautiful image of Cleopatra, unquote, located in this temple. By the way, I want to mention that a copy of this statue has survived from the first century BCE. It's a marble bust that was found at the Via dei Quintiliani on the Via Appia in 1784. It was a copy of the bronze statue of Cleopatra, and we get to know what a contemporaneous image of Cleopatra looked like. Look at it. She's wearing a broad band of a diadem with a knot on her head, remnant of a crown or some other attribute. Her nose is missing. It's very clear that based on the angle and the width of the area of the gap, that was indeed very prominent on this image. But it is a beautiful image of her. Absolutely beautiful. You can look it up. Well, gossip is spreading in Rome because, well, Julius Caesar just brought Cleopatra. Oh, by the way, Cleopatra also brought her husband, her 11, 12-year-old husband, Ptolemy the 14th, with her. And of course, his son, Ptolemy the 15th. There's rumors going around, and it's not very healthy. And probably because, Julius Caesar is married to Calpurnia. Yeah, he's already married. So the gossip is going around that he is going to change the laws of Rome so that he can divorce Calpurnia and marry Cleopatra, who is this foreigner, who is this strange Egyptian woman. How can this happen? And this is one of the reasons, one of many reasons why Julius Caesar was assassinated, one of. And as a result, Cleopatra quickly fled Rome and went back to Egypt, where she made Caesarion her co-regent. I mean, Julius Caesar's son, her co-regent. Well, now you have, of course, another, problem, and we'll go into this particular situation. But I will mention the fact that there's another civil war, at which point there will rise up a guy by the name of Octavian. Octavian is, of course, Augustus Caesar. And what happens is Julius Caesar had in his will that he adopted his nephew as his own son, and that is Octavian. And so Octavian then inherits Julius Caesar's legacy, so to speak, and he forms a second triumvirate, which basically includes Lepidus and his very close friend, a knight, simple man. His name is Mark Antony. And during the ensuing conflict, which of course Brutus is killed as well as others, now it's time to figure out who is loyal. And so Mark Antony, this is a good story. Mark Antony is chosen to figure out where Cleopatra and her allegiance resides. They're to meet at the city of Tarsus in 42 BCE. We want to see if she, assisted with the enemies or not. Okay, so what happened is that Plutarch writes as talks about the fact that you know, Cleopatra is planning to seduce Mark Antony. She is planning to really impress him, so there will be no trouble. How this goes, accordingly, is that Cleopatra, she arrived in style on a barge with a gilded stern, purple sails, and silver oars. The boat was sailed by her maids, who were dressed as sea nymphs. Cleopatra herself was dressed as Venus, the goddess of love. She reclined under a gold canopy, fanned by boys in Cupid costumes. Antony, continues this ancient writer, an unsophisticated, pleasure-loving man, was impressed by this blatant display of luxury, as Cleopatra had intended. So now Cleopatra offered to give the first dinner aboard her barge. This is a good first date. A good first date. And Plutarch continues, at once then, wishing to display his complacency and friendly feelings, Antony went and obeyed. I like the word, he obeyed her. Now, of course, Antony is missing the entire point here. For letting her serve the first meal, it really did make her more appear as the one in superior in status. But then again, he was never much of a diplomat, poor guy. So Cleopatra entertained him that night on that barge, and immediately he was in awe of the lights that she strung about the tree branches over his head, trees that were placed upon this barge. And they came complete with little constellations, which also refracted various shapes and images of light all around. Plutarch adds, it was a spectacle that seldom had been equaled for beauty. She also prepared 12 banquet rooms, within which were 36 couches made of the richest materials and with purple tapestries hung all around. All the vessels were made of gold, encrusted with fine gems. Antony was in awe. Cleopatra smiled and said she was in a hurry, but would do better next time, and added that all these objects were a gift to him, and invited him to come and dine with him again on the next day. Okay, so so this, you have this beauty everywhere. And he's like in complete awe. And she's like, I rushed to put this together. If I had more time, it'd be more impressive. Sorry about that. He's like, oh, okay. Well, time for the second date. The second date, Antony invited her to supper, hoping to outdo her magnificence. The second date didn't go very well. In fact, according to primary sources, he failed, but joked about it in a good-natured, vulgar way. But apparently Cleopatra didn't mind his tasteless sense of humor. In fact, she joined in. Huh? He made his terrible joke, his real vulgar joke. She grinned and she made a joke back that he did, and she did. And all of a sudden, here we go. Appian notes that Antony was amazed at her wit as well as her good looks. Just like Caesar before him, he was completely captivated. The Greek writer Plutarch wrote of Cleopatra, Plato admits 4 sorts of flattery, but she had 1,000. Were Antony serious or disposed to mirth, she had any moment some new delight or charm to meet his wishes. At every turn, she was upon him and let him escape her neither by day or night. She played dice with him. She drank with him. She hunted with him, and when he exercised in arms, she was there to see. At night, she would go rambling with him to disturb and torment people at their doors and windows, dressed like a servant woman, for Antony also went in a servant's disguise. However, the Alexandrians in general liked it all well enough and joined good humoredly and kindly in his frolic and play. What's going on? The two of the most powerful people in the Eastern Mediterranean world are playing ding dong ditchum to the local Alexandrians and running away dressed as servants. Whoa. Yeah, they're in love. And this romance continues. There is, of course, the fresh watering fish episode. This goes as follows. He went out, I'm reading from a primary source. People never hear these stories. He went out one day to angle, to go fishing with Cleopatra, and being so unfortunate as to catch nothing in the presence of his mistress. Being frustrated, he gave secret orders to the fishermen to dive under the water and put fishes that had already been taken upon his hooks, and these he drew up so fast that the Egyptians proceeded. So basically, he's having his servants go into the water and making it look like he's catching fish, sticking the fish on these hooks, so it looks like he's just lucky. But feigning great admiration, she told everybody how dexterous Antony was and invited them the next day to come and see him again. So when a number of them had come on board the fishing boats, as soon as he let down his hook, one of her servants was beforehand with his divers and fixed upon his hook a salted fish from Pontus. This is, of course, a freshwater lake. Antony, feeling his line give, drew up the prey, and when, as maybe imagine, great laughter ensued, Cleopatra said as follows: "Leave the fishing rod, general, to us poor sovereigns of Pharaohs and Canopus. Your game is cities, provinces, and kingdoms." She's good. Finally, after this, he roused himself up as if from sleep, and shaking off the fumes of wine, he said goodbye to Cleopatra and returned to his duties of Rome. 6 months after Mark Antony, uh, um, 6 months after Mark Antony left Cleopatra, Cleopatra gave birth to twins. His kids, Cleopatra Selene and Alexander Helios. Wow. Okay. So she has two kids from Mark Antony and a kid from Julius Caesar. Also, I'm just going to throw this one out. There's also controversy that she may have also a kid from Herod the Great, because one of Herod's special tutors was employed with her. There's no reason why he'd be tutoring other than maybe one of his kids in her court. Moving right along. Okay. Well, they did not see each other for 4 more years. Mark Antony, what happened is he got married. Mark Antony got married to Octavian's half sister, Octavia. He got married. All right, and with her, he also had 2 daughters, both named Antonia. Okay, so now Mark Antony, to seal the alliance with Octavian, marries his half sister Octavia, and they have kids. Of course, he still has kids with Cleopatra. But Mark Antony began to resent Octavian, who's Augustus, because he was successful at everything. In fact, even the oracle said that, yeah, you'll be successful, Mark Antony, but Octavian will always be more successful. So he decided he just could not stand living in Rome. And so he moved from Italy and Augustus, and he took his wife Octavia with him, and they moved to Greece. Then in 37 BCE, Mark Antony stopped by Alexandria to visit Cleopatra while on the way to invade Parthia. But guess what? The romance kindled again. In fact, he just could not stop thinking about her. So he actually invited, this is really awful, actually invited Cleopatra and the twins to join him on the Syrian campaign. You cannot make this up. So the twin children actually joined him with the mother. And he gave them special surnames. He called one the sun and one the moon. In fact, he said that he's going to give them great kingdoms and that they're going to have this noble blood. They are going to be the foundation for a great legacy ahead. In fact, Cleopatra was a distraction, and the war went on longer than it should have. He said that he was acting like he was under some kind of a drug or magic, because he once he had Cleopatra there. Why do we need to rush back? This is kind of strange. He's fighting against the Parthians, but as long as Cleopatra and his kids are with him, he's going to continue fighting rather than go back home to Octavia, his legitimate wife. Okay. So what happens now is eventually he concludes his campaign, and he decides that he's going to head back to Alexandria, and he's going to stay there. And then in 36 BCE, he marries Cleopatra. What? He marries Cleopatra. And they have another son together. His name is Ptolemy Philadelphus. The kid, like 3 kids now. Okay, wait a minute. He marries her, but wait, he's married to Octavia, the half sister of Octavian, who's Augustus. Do you think that this is going to go very well? Yeah, Octavian's be pretty mad at his bigamous son-in-law. Oh, no. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm sorry, this is awful. Meanwhile, you have Octavia remains loyal to her bigamous husband. In fact, she decides that she wants to visit Mark Antony in Athens so they can talk. Let's have a conversation. But Cleopatra, she was determined to keep him away from his other wife. In fact, Cleopatra, she cried, she fainted, she starved herself. She, according to Plutarch writes, she therefore pretended to be passionately in love with Antony herself and reduced her body by slender diet. She put on a look of rapture when Antony drew near, and one of faintness and melancholy when he went away. She would contrive to be often seen in tears, and then would quickly wipe the tears away and try to hide them, as if she would not have Antony notice them. And she practiced these arts while Antony was intending to go up from Syria to join the Mede. Her flatterers, too, were industrious in her behalf and used to revile Antony as hard-hearted and unfeeling, and as a destroyer of a mistress who was devoted to him and to him alone. For Octavia, they said, had married him as a matter of public policy and for the sake of her brother, and enjoyed the name of wedded wife. But Cleopatra, who was queen of so many people, was called Antony's beloved, and she did not shun his name nor disdain it, as long as she could see him and live with him. But if she were driven away from him, she would not survive it, At last, then, they so melted and enervated the man, he became fearful lest Cleopatra should throw away her life and went back to Alexandria, putting off the meads until the summer season, although Parthia was said to be suffering from internal dissensions. I'm telling you, I'm giving you a lot of information on Cleopatra that you would never know. So she does have him under her control. So Antony, never met with Octavia. He canceled his trip. Octavia went home to his house, even though Augustus Caesar, her brother, ordered her to dwell in her own home. She decided she's going to stay at Antony's home, uh, asking them to be peaceful. She cared for his kids, and was so sweet and kind. And she did not end her loyalty to Antony. Meanwhile, Cleopatra and Antony were calling themselves gods, the new Isis and the new Dionysus. And then, of course, in 34 BC, Antony made Alexandria Helios the king of Armenia, Cleopatra Selene, the queen of Cyrenicia and Crete, and Ptolemy Philadelphos, the king of Syria. So there you have it. And of course, Caesarion, however, he was proclaimed king of kings. Cleopatra was the queen of kings. I think you get the idea. So Octavian and Mark Antony began to prepare for war. We're going to be wrapping this up really soon, right? We're almost done. Okay. And so what happens is that they bring their troops together. Once again, bless her heart, Octavia is trying her best to bring people together to stop the war. Finally, what will happen? I mean, we'll go there in a few seconds. So what will happen is that Cleopatra is worried, especially at the city of Ephesus, because Mark Antony says, "Hey, go back to Egypt. I got to focus on fighting this war." Uh, Cleopatra makes the case. Well, wait a minute. I'm just as intellectually as bright as any of your generals. So why should I go home? She also did not want him to meet Octavia, who was trying to make another motion for them to meet again. So Cleopatra wins this argument, and with their armies, they all go to the island of Samos. And rather than prepare, Cleopatra and Antony throw one of the biggest parties in ancient times. The entire island of Samos has basically it is a huge party, and so while accordingly ancient sources write, well, almost all the world around was filled with groans and lamentations. A single island for many days resounded with flutes and string instruments. Theaters were filled and choral bands were competing with one another. Every city also sent out an ox for the general sacrifice, and the kings vied with one another in their mutual entertainments and gifts. And so men everywhere began to ask, how will the conquerors celebrate their victories if their preparations for the war are marked by festivals so costly? All right. So, but we're not done yet. So Cleopatra, she's also upset because the city of Athens absolutely loves Octavia, and so she decides that she wants to conquer Athens with her affections. Again, another story you're never going to hear anywhere, right? So when the festivities were over, Plutarch says, Antony, of course, they basically what will happen is that he will actually order Octavia from his house in Rome. She does leave, but she leaves with his kids. Care of them. And then what happens is that Cleopatra goes over to the Athenians and try with many splendid gifts to win the favor of the people. So the people voted honors to her and sent a deputation to her house, carrying the vote of who Antony was one. For was he not a citizen of Athens? And standing in her presence, he delivered a speech in behalf of the city. And so the idea is now she is given great honors. And she's going, yes, see, see, Octavia, they love me too in Athens. Okay. All right. So there you have it. I mean, what about the war? Isn't there a war going on here somewhere? Yeah. So long time, you're going to have now Octavian, of course, who's Augustus. Well, of course, obviously, will make a case that Mark Antony, before the Senate, is unable to be fit as the co-ruler of this empire. They'll bring many reasons for this. One of them is uh, uh, Justice will say, well, in his will, it says that Mark Antony dies anywhere, even in Rome. His body is to be, according to his will, be placed with Cleopatra in Alexandria. Not much loyalty from that perspective. Then there is the story, of course, where Mark Antony conquered Pergamum, remember that library there, and took all those books and brought them back to Cleopatra. There's that too. Or what about the time in Ephesus, where, of course, she was accorded various special titles, gifts. So what will happen is the Senate is convinced Mark Antony is unable to be a ruler with Octavian. And so we have the great Battle of Actium in 31 BCE along the coast of Greece. Cleopatra brought along 60 of her ships, and they fought this naval battle. But observing Antony's cumbersome, badly manned galleys, and how they're losing to the Roman lighter, swifter boats, she became uncomfortable. It wasn't exactly that he was completely losing, but it didn't look good. And so what happened is Cleopatra left the battle and took her 60 ships with her. Rather than being a great general, Mark Antony was going, hey, where did she go? Oh, she's going back to Alexandria. Oh, no, she can't go. And he leaves the battle and turns his ship around and follows her. He is what? Yeah. So what happened then is that the trip back wasn't very comfortable. They weren't really talking to each other, and then it becomes, of course, even more of a mess because then he goes back to Alexandria. He is brooding, and then so Octavian's forces arrive at Alexandria, and his forces were, go out and meet them. And he's thinking, oh, good, this is going to be a good battle. You know what his troops do? They salute Octavian's troops and join them. Like, oh no, what happened? Why are they turning against me? So he thinks that Cleopatra, she must have betrayed me. Cleopatra is now fearing for her life, thinking that Mark Antony is angry at her. And so she flees and hides from him. And of course, the idea is the rumor spreads that she dies. He hears the rumor that she killed herself or she got killed, and he is so distraught. He said, now, Antony, why delay longer? Fate has snatched away your only reason for living. This is so sad. So sad. Mark Antony really loved Cleopatra to the point where he wasn't even thinking straight. Here's a man who had half the Roman Empire, the entire Eastern Mediterranean, a great accomplished general. He had it all. And yet, the only thing that he really cared for was Cleopatra. It was his only reason for living. So he went to his room. He opened his coat. He said, I will soon be with Cleopatra. He ordered his servant by the name of Eros to kill him. Eros, please, kill me. But Eros, his servant, killed himself instead. Antony said, well done, Eros. You show your master how to do what you didn't have heart to do yourself. Antony then stabbed himself in the stomach, passed out on the couch. But when he woke up, he begged the servants to put him out of his misery. They ran away. At last, Cleopatra's secretary came and told him that Cleopatra wanted to see him, that she was alive. He was overjoyed, and he had himself carried to her mausoleum. Cleopatra was afraid to open the door because of the approaching of Octavian's army. And so 2 servant women let down ropes from a window and pulled him up. Distraught, Cleopatra laid Antony on her bed, and she beat her breasts, calling him Lord, husband, and emperor. And what did this simple man say in response? He said, don't pity him, but to remember their past happiness. And then he died. And he died. He died. That's the last words of Mark Antony was basically, we were happy together, weren't we? This is a story of love, but I'm not sure how much she loved him, but he definitely loved her. There's no question about that. Well, of course, when Octavian arrived, Cleopatra refused to let them in, and eventually he does get in. He does capture Cleopatra. And the big worry of Octavian is hoping that Cleopatra is not going to kill herself to take away his prize from the triumph march in Rome later on. So that's kind of, in fact, he respected her quite a bit. Well, what happened is this. Oh, by the way, he said that he's not going to kill her, that in fact, he's going to retire her to a villa. So she's going to live a good life the rest of her life, but she's no longer going to be queen. Well, according to various stories, she returned to the mausoleum, took a bath, ordered a feast. A meal was prepared and a basket of figs was brought in. Some say that there was a poisonous asp and she put her hand in and she was bitten. 2 pricks were found on Cleopatra's arm. And so it could have been a bite mark, you know. And the funny thing is, or sad thing is that Octavian knew at the last minute that she was going to do this. He's trying to keep her alive as much as possible. And then all of a sudden, he receives a letter from her saying that she wants to be buried with Antony in the mausoleum. At that moment, he knew, absolutely knew. But Cleopatra did actually earn Octavian's respect. He says, but Caesar, although vexed at the death of the woman, admired her lofty spirit. And he gave orders that her body should be buried with that of Antony in splendid and regal fashion. Her women also received honorable interment by his orders. When Cleopatra died, she was 40 years of age, save one, which is 39, and had shared her power with Antony more than 14. Antony was 56 years of age, according to some, according to others, 53. Okay, so of course now the statues of Antony were torn down, but those of Cleopatra were left standing because Archibius, one of her friends, gave Caesar 2,000 talents in order that they may not suffer the same fate as Antony's. Because Caesarion posed a direct threat to Octavian, to Augustus, Caesarion was put to death. But as for the twins and the son of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, they were allowed to live. And you know who took them in to raise them? Octavia. Gotta tell you, God, what a woman, right? God, you know, she's like this heroine, this long-enduring, loving individual. She takes them in, even though that their mother was Cleopatra. They had to have home. They had to have a home, place to be. And so that is the story of Cleopatra. It's a very complicated story for a very complicated person. But thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you. All right. Covered a lot of material. Oh, hopefully somebody says, thank you so much for this. I majored in anthropology at UCR. Love learning about the ancient civilizations. This was great, and I look forward to the next lecture. Says Nanda. Lynn says, thank you very much. Yes. We went over time, but I think it was worth it. I think I think you have a really good idea who Cleopatra is, or who was. So there you have it. You know, it's interesting.
It's like a giant soap opera.
Isn't it a giant soap opera? Right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura Wayne. For what you said, yeah. Yeah, especially Ptolemy the Eighth. You just can't make that guy up. He's awful. I tell you. You have to draw a diagram to figure out who he's with at any given moment. And who he's betraying. And who he's married. He married his married his sister, divorced her, married his niece.
I just hope Cleopatra's kids never had to do a family tree project.
Yeah, that's where it gets problematic, because I could tell you about that a little bit as well. When it comes to family trees, Cleopatra's line is pretty interesting. Yeah. In fact, let's see here. It's interesting because Cleopatra's line continues. In fact, if we trace Cleopatra's line, Cleopatra Selene, the daughter of Cleopatra, who married Juba II of Mauritania, they had Ptolemy II, who had Julia Urania, who had Drusilla, who had Sohomenus, who had Gaius Julius Alexio, who had Gaius Julius Subsigarius, who had Gaius Julius Longinus, who had Iamblichus of Emesa, who had another Sulpicius, who had Uranius, who then had another Uranius, another Iamblichus, another Urania, another Hemericus of Apamea, another Iamblichus, a Tetradarchus, an Artemia, a Sidorius, a Saint Lupercanius, Artemia de Genova, Bugezovo, Arnulf of Metz, Ainsago of Metz, Pepin II, Charles Martel, Pepin the Short, and Charlemagne. And I have 3 lines back to Charlemagne. So there you have it. I'm related. And so is Lauren Geithner, and by the way, Terry, I just gave you the direct line all the way back from Charlemagne to Cleopatra. Isn't that weird? So apparently, if I act a little crazy, I'll just hey, just a little bit of little Ptolemy, the eighth is going on there. I can't help it. Sorry. Yeah, you're surprised I have the list all the way back, right?
Of course. Nothing about you surprises me.
Like I said, the funny thing is so many people are related to Charlemagne that everybody's, that means Cleopatra's in everybody's line. And it's obviously, again, I always say this, there's always somebody who's going to be lying too. Yeah, this is really your kid. Yeah, it wasn't somebody else, that was out in the field somewhere else genetically. But if you want to go strictly by titles, strictly by name lineage, then yeah, mine goes directly all the way back to when it comes to blood lineage, probably not. So apparently I'll have that diluted line. Hopefully all the recent marriages will get rid of that strange inbreeding. So hopefully it doesn't pop up in the line that
Yeah, just don't be marrying your first cousin or anything.
Oh yeah, or your niece or your sister, because that was commonplace amongst the Ptolemies. They should call the drama of Ptolemy the eighth. They should call it All in the Family. Sorry.
I have a quick question. I was thinking about this. You had mentioned how Antony was considered a citizen of Athens. Was Cleopatra or her kids ever considered citizens of Rome?
Were they? Yes, they were.
Okay.
Because they're Julius Caesar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they were officially citizens of Rome. They were Roman citizens.
Well, they are officially recognized, yeah, because you cannot have her being recognized in the Temple of Venus Genitrix without being officially part of Rome or live there.
Interesting.
And the worst part about the Venus Genitrix, that's dedicated to the billions. I mean, that's having a statue of her there. I mean, that's just like really saying she's of our family. It's kind of a yeah, Julius Caesar really crossed some lines there. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess I just never realized the history between those two is as in that much detail. They focus on Mark Antony and her so much. You don't realize that background. That's very interesting. Thank you.
Well, yeah, and I kind of picture Cleopatra living in Rome for 2 years. I mean, we always think of her in Alexandria in Egypt, and here she's living in his villa.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully not the same villa as Pulchria, his wife. Hopefully but further away. But of course she's there with her brother husband who's like 12. They're living there. Yeah, there's no consummation going on this early, but still it's pretty weird stuff.
That's pretty weird.
It's weird. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Times have changed for the better.
Yeah. But did you notice all the powerful women throughout the Ptolemies?
Yeah.
And there seems to be resistance towards that power. I love that towards the end they even had there's 3 people that are in power, a triumvirate, and they're all 3 were women. Not a dude in the bunch. It's like it tells you something right there. So and it's fascinating because in Alexandria and during the time of the Ptolemies, in Egypt in general, is that women and men legally were complete equals. Seriously, they really were complete equals. So that means in a divorce, the woman could declare the divorce, or the man could declare the divorce. And when they divided things up, they divided into 3. The woman, she received 1/3, the man received 1/3, and the children received 1/3.
Ah.
That's how they broke things up. When it comes to property, women had between 1/4 to 2/3 of all the property in Egypt as property owners. They're runners and vineyards and factories and manufacturing places of all sorts, and they were in charge of fisheries, and they were merchants. This is fascinating, right? So there was a place in Egyptian culture where women could rise to these positions of power and be respected at the same time. Well, you see the case with Berenice, right? They loved her so much that when she was killed, they just killed him. Forget you, you know. And of course you have powerful women like Cleopatra the First, Cleopatra the Second, and Cleopatra the Third. These are very strong and noble women who had commanded great power and ruled in their own right. Yeah, just going back to the legacy of pharaonic Egypt earlier, right back to the time of the indigenous Egyptians, where we have female pharaohs as well. So that continues on, and of course the importance of religion. These are literally considered gods. Cleopatra was Isis. So she's revered as an aspect of Isis through through the cult of Serapis. Aspect of Isis resided in her, and so she is, in a sense, an aspect of this goddess.
And she is so intelligent with all the languages she spoke and all of her other accomplishments. And yet she's the one, who crashes and burns.
Yeah, I think it's in the case of everybody, the idea of having too much power. I think it becomes problematic.
Yeah.
I think where things really start to turn south was, and this is mentioned in ancient times, is why did you party in Samos? What was that all about? When you should have been preparing for battle.
Yeah.
You should have been drilling your army, getting your navy ready. You should have been, preparing, taking this seriously. And what happens during this time is they have a big party in Samos, and they cross over to Athens and try to convince the Athenians that she's just as good as his other wife. I mean, what are you thinking? Why are you doing that? And so, I'm not sure what exactly happened, that there's some kind of breaking point. And the other part is that you had this, really long conversation about how she's manipulated him. But the problem is, this is all coming in retrospect. So maybe she really did feel that way. That's the problem. Maybe she really, was trying to be strong, and maybe she really did believe that she was the one who loved him, and that, and for the other wife, it was just about duty. It was just about fulfilling obligations, which is a very Roman thing to do. Pietists, we have to be good Romans, whether we like it or not. You got to follow duty. That's the lesson of the Aeneid. You got Aeneas going, what should I do? I love Queen Dido. She has my heart. But if I stay with her in Carthage, then I'm never going to found those that would become the great people that would rule the world. What should I do? Do I follow my passion, or do I follow duty? And it's like, I got to follow duty. And in the case of Mark Antony, who, by the way, did read the, we'll read the Aeneid, I think. Let's see, maybe not. Let's see, he wasn't alive. No, he was already dead by then. So he would have read the Aeneid. But still, the ideas of duty still would have been having that same conflict. And you know what he chose? He chose passion over duty. He chose heart over mind. And do we really have to feel bad about that? I mean, hey, yeah, he lost, but he did find from his perspective, love. His last words were, "Hey, weren't we happy?" You know, you know. Usually a good, dutiful Roman would be like, "Hey, honor to my family and my legacy, and I fought well," and talk about their pedigree and everything else. And he's just like, "You love me?" Like,
if it was
poor
on the
guy
Hallmark
feels.
Channel, I wouldn't watch it.
I feel sorry for him.
Yes.
You can get
Kinda
this
sad.
idea. They sometimes they show him as really complicated and intellectual. He's not. He's a very simple guy. He really is. And more you read the stories of Mark Antony, the more you realize that. Just he's always one step behind everything. I mean, even with Julius Caesar before he was assassinated, he should have figured out things that, but he was kind of like slow picking up on it. There's one moment where Julius Caesar, appeared before his people, and he had Mark Antony say, "Hey, hold a crown over my head and say, that the gods proclaim that this is what I want to happen, and see what happens." And you know, goofy Mark Antony holds the crown over his head and says, "The gods of Rome proclaim this," and so forth. And everybody's quiet. There's crickets everywhere. Nobody's saying a single word. And apparently that's not a good idea. And then, of course, Julius Caesar basically says, "No, no, no. Who am I to be king when Zeus alone is king?" and so forth. Well, Mark Antony should have gauged at that point that Julius Caesar was kind of losing it. Especially at another point when they asked Julius Caesar, "You're just trying to destroy the republic," and Julius Caesar said, "I am the republic." I mean, when that happens, you gotta do things about it, or they're worshiping images of him in the temple. Okay, so what happens is this: he doesn't figure it out, and he is the last person, and he figures it out, and he's actually running to the site where Julius Caesar is going to be assassinated. It's too late. He just, slow guy. Sorry, just a simple knight, leads with his heart, and hey, I can knock my ancestors. Anyway, well, the theoretical ancestors, which is most likely not true, just by name only. But
But it's a great play.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, great. Julius Caesar is a great play.
And so is Cleopatra.
Cleopatra's a great play.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of this is not in that play. I'm surprised where Shakespeare had actually. Yeah. Any other questions? Sorry, I was going to go off on a wild tangent, but I think I've been doing that already.
I had another one. You had mentioned Cleopatra had abandoned the naval battle against Augustus with her 60 ships. Mm-hmm. Pure speculation. Do you think if she would have stuck around, would that have made a difference, or was that just more of a pageantry that she was leaving there, or would those 60 ships really have changed the course or the tide of that battle, or even the war?
60 ships, by all means, can change the course of a battle.
So Augustus's fleet. So I guess that's the question. Is I don't know what the size of his fleet was. So 60 ships is a significant amount.
It's a lot of ships. Yeah.
Interesting. So her leaving was really the pinnacle point of the loss of that entire war. Really.
Yeah. And she looked at the situations. She gauged it. She realized that Octavian ships were swifter, more maneuverable, that the Alexandrian ships were cumbersome. Almost reminds me of the Spanish Armada, when it comes against the English fleet, when you have the faster ships moving around. And so she surmised that there's they're not going to win, but really there's something about staying power. You got bigger ships. Maybe if she stayed, maybe the battle, I don't know, maybe the battle would not have been won, but maybe if she stayed and Mark Antony stayed, perhaps when they did retreat, his troops would not so easily surrender.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it just seems like when she walked away and he followed, the whole system broke down at that point. The troops and everybody just threw up their hands and said, "Oh, okay, I guess we're over."
Yeah, pretty much that's it. Their loyalty was lost.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the Romans are always, even the ancient world in general, speaking of general, the general is the example.
Yep.
He is the example to his troops, and if he's not willing to take, risk his life, and what are they fighting for,
Yep.
right? So I mean, yeah, the bond between him and his men were broken, and it was already starting to break down in Syria when he invited Cleopatra with her kids to the battlefield in Syria against the Parthians. Why would you do that? Why would you bring them? And they said that he was completely distracted. And because of the distraction, the war went on longer than usual, which means more people are being killed in battle. Well, that's not going to endear the troops to Cleopatra. And what I didn't go into is that really what happened in Rome when Augustus is appealing to the Senate is their whole thing was, we are determining that he is unfit to rule, that he is, and we talked about the fact that Cleopatra was the one giving the orders and not him, that she was the one that was clearly in charge. And you read the sources, and it does look like that. It looks like she's the one who had the ultimate say. Now, having said that, we got to realize these sources could be very biased, and they're written in retrospect. And so may have been just a very shared kind of thing. It seemed to be, from his perspective, a very good relationship. I don't know what she thought. I kind of am concerned, although they certainly had enough kids together. Very odd family. Can you think about this? Spending the holidays with the Anthony and Cleopatra. Their kids. You got this Caesarean, and you got these twins, this other boy, and then you have these other kids from other places. They're all part of the one big happy family, apparently. But at the same time, I think also we got to think about family. Let's move on to people like Octavia. I didn't spend enough time on her, which I did, but I had paragraphs from ancient times about Octavia, and the fact how she over and over again tried to end the dispute between her half brother and her husband, and she was always defending her husband and trying to meet with him in different places, have a conversation so he can come back to his senses. And she stayed in his home, and his visitors, she would allow them to come into her home, even when he was doing his own thing, and treated them with complete hospitality, and gave him her friendship, raised his kids, and even after he died, continued to raise his other kids. I mean, what an amazing person this is.
Do you think she did that out of Roman duty, as you mentioned before? Do you think this was a terrible love triangle, and she just was really in love with Mark Antony in the same way that he was in love with?
Cleopatra's viewpoint is that this is all duty.
Okay.
But from and of course a Roman viewpoint would be pietist duty. She is, in fact, they said that by her being so good to him, it made him look even worse. because she was doing everything to be kind to him, and he did everything to just kind of disrespect her. And so, in a sense, killing him with her kindness, it could have been a ploy, but then again, probably not because she took in his kids, his 3 kids from Cleopatra afterwards. So
Yeah.
I think that at the very least, she has a very high view of what family is. I think that, even over duty, because she did things that seem to be pressing one's luck when it comes to duty. I don't think she would have, duty was, let's just meet once in Athens and you don't show up, that's it. But she continued to try. And I think that's more than just duty. That shows that she does have something that she wants to bring the family back together again. I'm not sure if it's love or she's doing it for the kids. I don't know.
Fascinating. I was not aware of that aspect of the story, that Cleopatra's kids went to basically her, rival,
Yep.
her romantic rival. That's fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, and then they married. Then she had to marry off to Cleopatra. Selene was married off to the king of Mauritania.
Wow.
They arranged this, so she gave her a royal a marriage.
And what happened to the twins?
Well, that's one of them. So Cleopatra Selene was one of them.
That's right.
And he was married too. I don't remember who he was married to. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, because the only reason why I know is because of my lineage. Mauritanian, the Syrian to the Roman, and then to the Gallic context. Yeah. So yeah, you have that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, so she went beyond the call of, I would say, duty. I think there should be a book just on her.
Absolutely.
Octavia should have probably a book out there. I don't have it, but I think a good book just on Octavia would be excellent. I think there needs to be a movie that in a better way.
Yeah, instead of a new Cleopatra, make the Octavia movie with Cleopatra as the the co-star rather than the main protagonist.
I think that would be ideal.
Yeah, almost Cleopatra as the antagonist in that storyline.
Turn it around.
Yeah.
Play, it's like, but wait a minute, Cleopatra, female archetype. That's true, but Octavia, female archetype. So yeah, we could play all different sides of the story.
Yeah.
And I think it is a very, it's a great story. And also play up Mark Antony as maybe a little bit not as bright.
He's kind of bumbling. I would say almost bumbling at times.
Bumbling. I mean, him at that dinner party. So sad. He's like, wow, and she's like, I just threw this together because I just had a lot of time that, just so they put together.
This whole thing, I just had this lying around.
And then he strikes out the second date, because self-deprecating, vulgar humor. We've all had that date that didn't go very well. And, and then all of a sudden she joins in. I think that's cute. That'd be really good to play up, She has the same weird, awful sense of humor, which she probably would have given her family legacy. A very warped sense of humor from her, but yeah, and then she was always there. And the fishing story is cute too. I'm the first person to hear my own fishing story. I fish for that one. Nobody ever tells that story. Great story. But yeah, talking about them just playing back and forth. It looks like they were. I'm sorry. It looks like they're big goof offs. I mean, they seem like jokesters. They don't seem very serious.
Yeah, I mean, ringing the doorbells and running away.
Play ding dong ditch them. Knocking, dressed as servants.
Yeah.
In Alexandria, knocking at doors and running off, and people laughing. I mean, that's not really serious people, or hooking other people's fish lines, or playing dice together. And no, they had fun. Whether she loved him or not, that's a good question. Maybe yeah, she did, but she still always kept her mind on the fact that she was also utilizing him. She never got lost in the love. If there's love at all, she never allowed herself to get lost in it. He got lost. His story is just so pathetic. It's like, God, I've never seen such a pathetic man. Just like feel so sorry for. I feel bad for him, because he's just so. I'll say he's so dumb. I mean, bringing his wife, Syria. Oh God! And the party idea. What is that? Party island? I mean, who does that? No.
Yeah, that's a strange one. I mean, can you what would your speculation of the motivation behind that be of hosting a party pre?
Well, of course, the whole idea was the fact they said it was a distraction because he was thinking about meeting with his other wife, and that was. But the other was that they had fought so much that the troops needed to have something to cool off and to enjoy themselves. They needed to have some kind of celebration, bring up spirits by drinking spirits, apparently. But it could have been that. But and it is kind of a Eastern Mediterranean perspective. They kind of, you live for the moment, you enjoy the moment. That kind of fits Cleopatra's kind of MO, right? Enjoying the moment that you're in. But that kind of thinking doesn't work very well with Romans. Romans are all they're diehard pragmatists, and so from their perspective, they're acting like a bunch of heathens, and goofing around and being lazy. And again, it's about perspective. Although again, I'm not sure. I mean, they should have been preparing for a great battle, or a few. I mean,
do you think that they just maybe behind the scenes, Cleopatra and Mark Antony thought they were going to lose and this was their last hurrah, and they kind of had the feeling deep down that, we're not going to win this one anyway, so let's go out on top and have a good party now, because we're not going to have one later.
It kind of feels that way. I mean, it does. But I mean, I'm not sure if that's really did happen. That's the way I would think. I mean, my perspective, 21st century perspective, looking at it, going there's this is a doomed situation altogether. I mean, she certainly would have known that would have observed the kinds of ships that Octavian would be using long before this time. She would know that through her intelligence networks. So,
I would hope so.
Yeah, I would hope so. So maybe she already knew that this is not going to work. Maybe, or why not get the same kind of ships?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just a thought. Yeah, I don't know. There seems to be something kind of strange going on.
Yeah.
During that period of time, where she becomes incredibly upset and focused upon Octavia, and that becomes her obsession. And of course, you can't. There's something that Octavian had that Mark Antony and Cleopatra did not have, and that is righteous anger. Come on, I mean, think about it. Many of us, obviously we have, many of us have families, and some of us have, some brothers, have sisters. And if you saw somebody doing this to your half sister, your sister, somebody who proclaims that they're married to somebody else, that refuses to even see your sister, to have a decent conversation, to somebody who eventually, you see your sister being kind and defending, this person and taking care of his kids who are in Rome, and being there and being faithful and dutiful and trying so hard to make everybody happy, working so hard and breaking down during this whole crisis, and then seeing Mark Antony, of course, again, order her out of her house, Rome. out of her, out of his house, which is her house in Rome. You know, the cruelty, and then the cruelty that Cleopatra also displayed towards her. What would you do as a brother? You know, you'd be raged. You know, especially an Italian brother, a Latin brother. You did this to my sister, right? You know,
Yeah.
this is not going to go down very well. so Octavian has real anger towards Mark Antony and Cleopatra.
Yeah.
And I think that would fuel anything. I think that would be, that's enough. That's enough. And righteous anger to the point where much of the known world would go around going, yeah, you know, how could you do that how could you do that to your wife? You know, and how could you let them get away with that with your sister? You know, you can imagine. So you know, the story of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, I understand their point of view, and love is love. I got it. But, you know, what price to pay?
Mhm.
I think Mark Antony needed to be honest with his wife. He could have divorced her. He could have, he could have done these. He could have done it in a way that's not as bad as how he did it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my thought. So,
Yeah.
but then again, he's not thinking. Huh?
No, it's just fascinating. I mean, the story that the level of detail that you shared this evening was more so than I've ever obviously experienced with the Cleopatra storyline, and you know, going into the, like I said, the other characters, you know, Octavia, you know, Mark Antony's wife. I've never seen that perspective before, and to see Cleopatra as, I don't want to say as a bad as a villain in the story, but let's be real, she did have some attributes that you could say were probably negatively received in a lot of social circles.
Yeah. But she's following what she knows.
Yeah.
You take a look at her whole family line, and this is, unfortunately, now that we learned about the Ptolemies, all business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is just the way they did things at Alexandria. This is the way the Ptolemies were. And so she actually was actually conservative in comparison to some of her predecessors. You know, so she thinks from her paradigm that she's being, you know, pretty good here.
So she probably was battling or balancing duty and love. She may have loved Mark Antony, but she had generations of duty and you know, action behind her that she was following the framework that had already been put in place for generations and generations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the other question is, did she love Julius Caesar?
Mm.
So, you know, what about that relationship?
What's your answer?
Well, I mean, she's obviously using him. I mean, this is pretty. I mean, you know, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if everything is calculated or there is real feeling, or it's just a combination between the two. She's a very complicated person, but she did seem to have a lot of passion for Julius Caesar. But you know, maybe she's attracted to his power and what she can do for her and her position. Rome was very powerful. You know, you saw going back through the Ptolemies. You know, whenever there's a problem, you just call in Rome; they're going to fix everything for us. So, you know, having Caesarion. The other part was the fact that, I mean, you know, she did love Julius Caesar. She certainly got married to her brother very quickly. You know, the other one, Ptolemy the 14th. There's so many Ptolemies.
Yeah.
And then they went on for their cruise. You know, it's like so. I mean, and then she did bring Ptolemy the 14th with her to Rome. So, you know, I don't know how much is that to keep the legitimacy. I don't know. But when it comes, so I don't know when it comes to Julius. When it comes to Mark Antony, we're back to, I'll just say, a qualified maybe. Yeah. But
Absolutely.
yeah. And of course, we learned a lot about just the history of the Ptolemies in general, going all the way back. It seemed to be a great start. Started off pretty well. We have the first three Ptolemies, very reputable. But the interesting thing is that, and I'll bring this up, is that second Ptolemy married his sister, and then later on, it became business as usual to marry your sister or a close relative. So many of them. And I have to ask the question, you have that much intermarriage, take a look at that.
Mhm.
There's one sense where we're not sure if this person married their mother or not. Had a kid with them. It's like, who is this? So we can go into there. Also, I had that in my notes, but that was a big debate with various scholars. So you have that mixture. Wouldn't there be something biologically that would be also kind of strange going on, or is it just me? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the biology's got to catch up with you if you're doing that. The inbreeding just has to, right? I mean, it did in the English Empire, and the Middle Ages. So
yeah, in the Spanish.
Yep.
Yeah. This went on for a couple hundred years, of just this really incredibly, not just cousins, but just not first cousins. We're talking sister, and the next one has married her sister, and I mean, what happens when you have all that? So I'm wondering how much of Cleopatra was also influenced by certain things. I don't know. Maybe there's a crazy gene. I don't know. I don't know how much crazy goes along with that kind of mixture. But well, you ask the Spanish royal family. Have mad king this and that. So I mean, there is something to it. So yeah. Any other questions? All right.
Well, I had a quick question. You said that Octavian had agreed to give Cleopatra's women respectable burials. What had happened to them?
They kill themselves.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah. Starting with her closest servant. So yeah. They all didn't, and that was very upsetting for Octavian, for Augustus. He really, hate to say this. I mean, he's like maybe dupe number 3. He really, I skipped through that because I'm looking at my time. I had actually a page and a half just on him trying to keep her alive, trying for her not to kill herself, making her promise and putting guards to watch her and trying to make her happy. And yes, you can, have this mausoleum, you can, be there and, good food and anything she wanted. And yes, you'll be in this procession, but you, after the procession in Rome, you're going to retire to a nice villa. You're not going to be executed. I'm not going to shame you. I mean, he really, tried. She just killed herself anyway, which again tells you a lot about who she is. If I can't be queen of Egypt, I don't want to be alive. And so again, that shows her the duty aspect. But she wants to be buried with Mark Antony, which says, well, wait, why does she want to be? Okay, maybe there is a little feeling there because it's not to her advantage to be buried next to him. It wasn't very smart to get married to him either. But anyway, especially since he was already married. But
yeah, do you think Octavian was really would actually have provided for her in?
Oh yeah.
Because
absolutely.
the Romans didn't they were not kind to the people they conquered, were they?
Okay, so the Romans are interesting.
Okay. The
Romans are really complicated in if you give a promise, you fulfill that promise.
Oh,
and so they're brutal, but they fulfill their promises, except, they're in a Republican later Republic, have lots of problems that way. Even the justice system is kind of like one strike, we forgive you. Second strike, you're dead. It's kind of, it's like Mark, it's like what happened with Poppy. I mean, would he have killed Poppy? Who betrayed him, right? Huge war. He might not have. He didn't want to have him. His head was cut off. The guy was weeping, for heaven's sakes, because his friend, who was his political enemy, had his head cut off. He didn't want that to happen. There is this kind of also this mafioso business as business too. There is that side to it where I love you, but you die. You do have that, and that comes through. But yeah, no, it was very often where the Romans would capture people and would give them a nice retirement.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even Arsinoe, her sister, Arsinoe, the sister of Cleopatra, she went into that procession of Julius Caesar. What happened to Arsinoe? She was just retired. That's all. She wasn't killed. Her brother was killed, Ptolemy the 13th, in battle, drowned. But I mean, she wasn't killed.
Okay.
Then she ends up in Ephesus. And what happens to Arsinoe? She becomes, joins the priestesses of Artemis of the Ephesians. Then what happens, it's worse though, is that unfortunately when Cleopatra and Mark Antony arrive in Ephesus, you know what they do? They order her killed. And they actually grab her from the columns of the Temple of Artemis and they execute her. So they're the ones who killed her. The Romans didn't. Now they kept her alive. And she thought she's going to become a priestess of Artemis, and live happily ever after in Ephesus. Some people claim that there is her tomb has been discovered. So along the Via Sacra, excuse me. Which is like a tomb that's shaped like the Pharaoh's lighthouse. And it has the skeleton of a 17-year-old girl inside that was discovered. She was about 17 years of age. So they're not sure because the bones are pretty mutilated. So they can't take a correct DNA of it. But still, she did die in Ephesus. But yeah, so the Romans would do that. They would retire people. In fact, that continued even with the fall of the Roman Empire. You got Romulus Augustulus, the last Roman emperor, and who was like a teenage kid, and Odoacer, the German. This is the last of the Western Roman emperors. What does he do? He says, "Hey, kid, I'm retiring you." He retires him to a nice house in Campania and gives him a pension.
Wow. Okay.
And then, Cleopatra would have been probably in some kind of villa, probably living out her life and becoming obscure.
Worse than death.
Yeah. So you just kind of fade away. I mean, would she be remembered as much if she just retired and that was it? Lived out her life? Well, she'd be remembered, but not as much as this dramatic death. I love drama.
Did she kill her sister? I didn't realize she had her sister killed. Did she have?
Yeah, she had. Yeah, they had her sister killed. Mark Antony and her had their sister killed.
Was that due to like a rivalry for the throne type thing, or was there another issue? It was okay.
Yeah, yes, and also Arsinoe was not exactly the most loyal. Like for example, when Ptolemy the 13th took over, yes, Cleopatra and Arsinoe escaped from Egypt, and they put their troops along the garrison troops along the border. But later on, when you have Cleopatra's claim being supported by Julius Caesar, you're going to have Arsinoe changes sides and joins with Ptolemy the 13th into attacking the palace. And so, she switched sides. So she's not looked at as very loyal. and they thought as long as she's alive, there's a chance that she has a rival. And so Cleopatra decided to eliminate that rival. Yeah.
The Ptolemy way.
The Ptolemy, it's the Ptolemy way of doing things. Yeah.
Huh.
It's brutal, but that's the way things were. Yeah. The old days. Any other questions? Was this interesting? Did you guys enjoy yourselves?
Fascinating. Yes.
Yeah. You feel
very.
yeah. You feel like you understand. You feel like you know Cleopatra a little bit better now.
Hmm.
Definitely.
Maybe really well. You go and see her walking down the street, or understand her, because again, it's surprising how much they wrote about her in ancient times. And while you have this within various academic books, how very little of it trickles to the general public. Thank you so much, Natalie. Yes, for being here. Thank you, Thomas. Yeah. Yes. I'm surprised at how little we hear about these stories, especially the rivalry between. All right. Well, I guess we're going to close it up. Thank you so much for coming.